This is important. New developments overnight in the Middle East. The U.S. carried out another round of strikes on Iran after another ship was attacked in the Strait of Hormuz. Iran says it retaliated by targeting American bases in several Gulf countries. We have seen several of these back and forth attacks over the last week. The ceasefire has basically unraveled. And within the last hour, the president told Fox News that the U.S. will run and defend the strait and expects to be reimbursed for that. How he expects that remains to be seen. Joining us now, retired four-star U.S. Army General Barry McCaffrey, a decorated combat veteran of Vietnam and a former battlefield commander in the Persian Gulf. Vaughn and Susan still here. General, it feels like we could be at a major turning point here. These attacks are happening more and more frequently, while the president is saying things like we're going to get reimbursed, showing no evidence that that will ever happen. Iran is certainly not behaving that way.
Well, you're right. We're at a point where the only option left, in my view, for the president is vertical escalation. He can't use ground combat forces. We could easily invade Iran with 150,000 troops, have a year-long campaign, and eliminate the current power structure. We're not going to do that. I don't think we're going to try and seize islands in the Gulf either. Karg Island could be assaulted by the 82nd Airborne. We're not going to do that. So what's left to them? Possibly an all-out campaign against economic targets. That might crack them in 90 days. They are a basket case economically. Tactically, they've been devastated by the U.S. Navy and Air Force attacks, 21,000 sorties between the Israelis and the U.S. But when you look at it dispassionately, it appears as if Iran has the strategic, economic, and political advantage. So the U.S. Navy is not going to be able to solve this problem.
Then what is our best case outcome right now? General?
Oh, excuse me. I didn't catch the ball being lateraled here. Probably you can eliminate some presidential options. He's not going to throw in the towel and concur that they become a nuclear power in 5 years. He's not going to give up on the notion that the Strait of Hormuz is an international waterway. He's not going to use ground combat power. By the way, he's losing his allies in the Gulf. They're potentially vulnerable to massive destruction by Iranian ballistic missiles and drones. There's no way to get at all the launch sites in Iran. I mean, these missiles the drones can be fired 150 miles from the coast. So you can't just do raids along the, Bushehr waterfront and think that that's going to bring this to a halt. So again, I don't see what the U.S. options really are. And you can't keep this massive U.S. naval and air power force in the Gulf forever. So the one option he might consider is economic targets. That will, of course, be a nasty option, huge suffering among the Iranian population. They are not going to rise up. The IRGC murdered 40,000 of them a few months ago. So we'll end up with an Iran that's prostrate. It doesn't have any economic options either. Where's all this going? Confrontation with no end.
Susan, it seems like this war created a new problem, the Strait, without solving any of the original ones that it was meant to.
Yes, indeed. That's a good summary. Unfortunately, Steph, first of all, the Strait of Hormuz, right? Not only open before the war, but I think even more importantly is the breakthrough for the Iranians of understanding that they may now have a weapon at their disposal, which is even more potent in some respects than the future prospect of nuclear weapons, in the sense that it's a weapon, the Strait of Hormuz opening and closing it, that they're now using. So that's number one, is that it's a breakthrough that has increased Iran's power. Also, while Trump launched the war saying that he wanted to bring about regime change in Iran, the regime change that he's brought about seems to have empowered hardliners in the IRGC. And you see that in the breakdown and unraveling of this very fragile ceasefire. So, you have empowered groups who are most determined to resist the United States, you have given them the leverage of the Strait. And I would also point out, you noted that statement from President Trump this morning to Fox News saying, well, we're in control of the Strait. In fact, they're even going to pay us to maintain it. Donald Trump has been saying, even for Trump, a kind of a blizzard of untruths and misleading statements from him and his administration about what was in the memorandum of understanding, really, the memorandum of misunderstanding that's at the heart of why this has unraveled. The U.S. and Iran from the very beginning had a different understanding about what that ceasefire agreement said about who controlled the Strait. There's an excellent piece in the Times today. I suggest that people look at it to understand the sloppiness and the sort of ill-conceived nature of the language in that agreement that basically it made it almost inevitable this was going to break down because Trump said the Strait is going to be open. The Iranians from the very beginning said, no, in fact, this agreement ratifies our control of the Strait. And so I think the general's right. It's going to be conflict for a while going forward.
Okay, well then Fox News viewers, I'm guessing, Vaughn, might not be reading that New York Times piece, or Steve Bannon's listeners might not be. What are they telling their audiences? Because Donald Trump saying over and over this nonsense that we're going to take over the Strait and we're going to be reimbursed for it. Is right-wing media saying the same thing? And is their audience believing it?
The issue for, Stephanie, the right-wing audiences, Fox audiences, is the number of folks that have young men and women, family members that are in service in theater in the region. And I've heard from multiple people that have loved ones who do not know where the president is going to take this war. And the general suggests that there is no feasible way in which the president could send U.S. servicemen and women onto the ground and take over Kharg Island, for example, understanding the long-term ramifications of what that would mean for the U.S. military. At the same time, there are family members of folks that have proudly supported the military. And for a big reason why they voted for Donald Trump in 2024 was suggestion of, as President said time and again on the campaign trail, that we can no longer be the world's policemen. And yet the reality is that the president just this morning on Fox News, after feverishly, along with European allies, pushing back on Iran's demands of having escort service fees of vessels through the Strait of Hormuz, now suggesting the U.S. is going to actively run it and actively take these toll fees, really begs the question of what is the president's end game. And this is the issue on February 28th about the incoherent justifications for the war, and in the months since, the questionable objectives how they would come without having a stronger presence, for example, taking over the Strait of Hormuz or taking over Kharg Island. And I think that is the reality here that the president is up against in 4 months into this war, where even right-wing outlets know that there is no answer to what the president continues to say.
And that's just my quick follow-up, right? They're giving Donald Trump the airtime to push this narrative that's not true. But are they doing the same? Because to your point, it is incoherent and there's very little support for it.
There's, I mean, Stephanie, I think this is the difficult part of the ecosystem that right-wing media has created. Understanding that they have backed the president's campaign repeatedly against Iran and boosted the quickness and the swiftness in which the military objectives would be able to be achieved. And I think that it's a good question here. This second Trump administration is very different than the first Trump administration, where it was a lot of threats against North Korea and Venezuela, but little action. This time around, we're seeing the realities play out that maybe some of these right-wing audiences aren't seeing. But folks, down in Florida, they understand that in Cuba, for example, right, when we're talking about the economic pressure that the general was getting at, right, the Cubans are living through right now what happens when the U.S. cuts off the fuel supply. They are living through blackouts and concerns about the access to sanitary water. That is currently being lived out in one country. And if the president were to move forward with the threats that he has against Iran, to the general's point, you're looking at another country potentially living out the repercussions of the U.S.'s military actions.